There is a specific moment when the word appears in the air and something contracts inside the chest. It could be in a casual conversation, in a news story that pops up on the screen, or in that sudden silence when someone mentions that so-and-so is no longer here. The reaction is always the same. A subtle shift of gaze, an imperceptible change of subject, as if it were possible to push reality away just by ignoring its presence. Death. Even now reading that word, something stirs uncomfortably in the back of your mind. It's not exactly fear, it's something more primitive, more visceral. It's the feeling of standing in front of a door that should never be opened, of a truth that should remain covered by thick layers of distraction and denial. We live in strange times. We are the only species that knows with absolute certainty that it will die. And we are also the only one that expends enormous energy pretending that this is not true. We build entire lives on the silent premise that we are exceptions to the universal rule, as if awareness of our finitude were a manufacturing defect that can be corrected with enough technology, success, or mental occupation. But there is something deeply disturbing about this contradiction. When death finally approaches, for us or someone close to us, it is not just the end that terrifies us. It is the sudden realization that we have spent years, perhaps decades, living as if we were immortal. It is the recognition that we have built the meaning of our lives on a fundamental lie. And now we no longer know who we are when that lie unravels. This is not a reflection on death itself. It is about something much more disturbing. How we have become a civilization that must deny its own nature in order to function. How did we get to the point where accepting our mortality became a form of weakness, and living as if we were eternal became the only socially acceptable way to exist? Because there is an ancient, almost lost wisdom that whispered something different. An understanding that recognizing our finitude was not a curse. It was the beginning of true life. Imagine a Roman general at the height of his glory. The streets of Rome are filled with cheering crowds. Flower petals fall like golden rain, and the echo of applause reverberates between the marble columns. He stands at the center of it all, covered in laurels, celebrated as a living demigod. It is the high point of his existence, the climax of a life devoted to conquest and power. And then, in the midst of all this exaltation, someone leans in and whispers 4 words that cut through the euphoria like a cold blade. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. It wasn't cruelty, it was lucidity. The ancients understood something we have completely lost. That awareness of death was not the opposite of life. It was what gave life its true weight and meaning. They knew that a man who forgets his mortality becomes dangerous, not only to others, but mainly to himself. Because when we believe we are invincible, we stop questioning what really matters. The memento mori was not a morbid philosophy. It was a spiritual exercise, a way of waking up from a dangerous dream. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "You could leave life now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think, not as a threat, but as an invitation to authenticity, as a constant question. If this were my last day, would I be living in accordance with who I really am?" For centuries, this awareness of finitude permeated not only philosophy, but the entire structure of society. In the Middle Ages, Christian monks created entire congregations dedicated to the good death, not because they were obsessed with destruction, but because they understood that those who do not know how to die do not know how to live. The motto of one such congregation was Quodi morimur. We die every day. Each dawn was a reminder that existence is borrowed, temporary, precious precisely because it is fragile. Baroque art was full of skulls hidden among flowers, skeletons that appeared unexpectedly in the midst of parties and celebrations, not to cause horror, but to whisper the same ancient truth. All this is beautiful because it is fleeting. All this matters because it will not last forever. Death was not the enemy of beauty. It was what made beauty possible. But something began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, that whisper grew fainter. The wisdom that had sustained entire civilizations began to be seen as primitive, superstitious, unnecessarily gloomy. And in its place, something new emerged. The belief that we could live better if we simply stopped thinking about death. It was the beginning of a profound transformation in human consciousness. A change that would lead us to build an entire society on the denial of our own nature. And we are still living with the consequences of that change today, even without realizing it. Because when a civilization decides that remembering death is morbid, it does not get rid of death. It only condemns itself to live in an increasingly artificial way, increasingly distant from what it really is. There was a moment in history when something fundamental broke. It was not a dramatic event. There were no manifestos or declared revolutions. It was a silent, almost imperceptible change, like a melody that loses its lowest notes until only a high, empty sound remains. Science began to explain the world in a way that religion never could. Diseases that were once seen as fate or divine punishment revealed their biological causes. Natural phenomena that seemed miraculous or heavenly punishments showed their physical mechanisms. And slowly, humanity began to believe something dangerous, that everything, absolutely everything, could be controlled, predicted, corrected. Death, which for millennia had been accepted as the natural frontier of human existence, began to be seen differently. No longer as an inevitable fate, but as a technical problem waiting for a solution. Every death needed a specific cause. No one died simply because they were alive. There was always something wrong. The heart that failed, the liver that gave out, the disease that was not detected in time. It was as if mortality itself were a manufacturing defect that medicine had not yet managed to correct. And along with this transformation, something even more profound happened. The religious certainties that had once offered not only explanations but meaning for life and death began to lose their authority. The church, which for centuries had been the organizing center of human existence, was gradually pushed to the margins of social life. In its place, something new emerged, the individual as his own creator of meaning. It sounds liberating, doesn't it? Finally free from the shackles of ancestral dogmas, able to construct our own identity, our own values, our own purpose. But there is something no one told us about this freedom. It comes at a terrible price. When the meaning of life becomes something I must create myself, when my identity becomes a project I must fulfill myself, death ceases to be merely the natural end of a journey. It becomes the total annihilation of everything I am. Think about that for a moment. If you can feel this shift, if you can capture the abysmal difference between these two worlds, you will understand something fundamental about modern suffering. In the old view, death was a passage, painful, but part of something bigger than you. In the modern view, death is the absolute end of the only project that really matters, yourself. That's why our era has become obsessed with youth, with fitness, with the constant optimization of body and mind. Not because we are more vain than our ancestors, but because we unconsciously know that we are all we have. If I am my own project, if my life only has value through what I achieve or become, then every sign of aging, every limitation, every reminder of finitude becomes an existential threat. The mirror becomes an enemy, the gym a temple of denial, plastic surgery a desperate ritual of escape. We are not just trying to look good, we are fighting against the evidence that we are mortal. Every wrinkle is a betrayal, every gray hair is a sentence. Every backache is an unbearable reminder that time is passing and taking with it everything we believe ourselves to be. We began to hide the dying in hospitals far from our eyes. We have turned death into something clinical, aseptic, technical. Old customs, such as viewing the body of a relative at home, living naturally with the presence of finitude, have come to seem primitive, even morbid. As if the mere proximity to death could contaminate our belief that we are different, special exceptions to the universal rule. Compare this with the naturalness with which our ancestors dealt with cemeteries in city centers, with wakes at home, with open conversations about death. They weren't braver than us. They just didn't need to pretend they were immortal to make sense of their lives. But there is something deeply ironic about this transformation. In trying to rid ourselves of the suffering of accepting our mortality, we have created a much greater suffering, that of living in constant terror of it. In trying to turn death into a technical problem, we have made it a permanent existential trauma. By placing the I at the center of everything, we have made our own finitude unbearable. And so, without realizing it, we have become the first civilization in history that needs to deny its own nature in order to function. A society built on the fundamental lie that we are immortal, that our projects are eternal, that our individuality transcends the basic laws of existence. The result is a collective anxiety that permeates everything. The constant rush, the feeling that there is never enough time, the panic at any sign that time is passing. Because if I am all I have and if I am going to die, then nothing I do really matters. But if nothing matters, how can I go on living? It is this paradox that keeps us trapped. And it is in this paradox that we discover why fleeing our mortality does not set us free. It imprisons us in a way of life that denies who we are. Ivan Ilyich was 45 when it all started to fall apart. Not all at once, that would have been too easy to identify. It was a slow, almost elegant collapse, like a building that looks solid on the outside but is crumbling brick by brick from the foundations up. He had done everything right. He had a brilliant career as a judge, was respected by his colleagues and was well paid. He had a stable family, a beautiful home, and a balanced social life. He followed all the unwritten rules of a successful existence and fulfilled all the protocols of a life worth living. By the standards of his time and ours as well, Ivan Ilyich was a winner. Until one day, climbing a ladder to help decorate the living room, he slipped and hit the side of his body on a piece of furniture. Something simple, every day. the kind of accident that happens 1,000 times to everyone and is forgotten the following week. But this time it was different. The pain did not go away, and along with the pain came something much worse, the gradual certainty that he was dying. Tolstoy describes with surgical precision what happens when death ceases to be an abstraction and becomes a concrete reality in the life of someone who has spent his entire existence fleeing from it. Ivan doesn't just feel fear, he feels indignation, a deep revolt against the cosmic injustice of dying when he had done everything society expected of him. It can't be, he repeats to himself. Not me, not now. As if fulfilling social expectations were an insurance policy against mortality. As if living by the rules could guarantee an exception to the laws of nature. As if his dedication to work, his exemplary behavior, his organized and respectable life were bargaining chips he could present to death to negotiate an extension of his term. Ivan's rebellion is our rebellion. It is the silent cry of an entire civilization that believed in the implicit promise that if we do everything right, if we follow the script of modern life, if we build our careers, our families, our identities with dedication and competence, then we deserve to live forever. Or at least until we finish our projects, until we fulfill our dreams, until we become what we always wanted to be. But there is something even more disturbing in the story of Ivan Ilyich, something that Tolstoy captures with almost unbearable cruelty, the absolute isolation of someone who is faced with death in a society that does not know how to deal with it. Friends, family, colleagues, they all do exactly what we do today. They pretend that everything is fine, they change the subject, they keep up appearances, not out of malice, but because they too do not know what to do with the reality of human finitude. And Ivan realizes with terrible clarity that he has spent his entire life participating in this same charade, that whenever he encountered illness or death in others, he also looked away, also changed the subject, also preferred to believe that it was an exception, an individual problem, something that did not concern the universal human condition, that his own compassion was performative, superficial, because deep down he needed to keep his distance to preserve his illusion of immortality. Most devastating is the discovery that his entire successful life had been built on this denial. Every promotion, every achievement, every moment of satisfaction depended on the unconscious belief that he was different, special, immune to the limitations that affect other mortals. And now, face to face with his own finitude, this entire carefully constructed structure was revealed to be an illusion. Not just an illusion, a lie he had told himself for decades. Tolstoy wrote this story a few years before his own death, as a confession disguised as fiction. And the question he puts into Ivan's mouth is the question that haunts every modern person who is confronted with the reality of their mortality. Is there a meaning in my life that would not be nullified by the death that inevitably awaits me? It is a brutal question because it exposes the fragile nature of almost everything on which we base our identity. If the meaning of life depends on future projects, personal achievements, goals that are always one step ahead, then death really does nullify everything. If I am only what I can build, conquer, or become, then when I die, everything I was falls apart like a house of cards. If my existence only has value through what I can accumulate or achieve, then my finitude makes everything absurd, empty, purposeless. Ivan Ilyich dies in agony, not only physical but existential. He dies discovering that he has lived an entire life inauthentic, fleeing the only certainty that defined his human condition. And he dies alone, not because there are no people around him, but because no one else knows how to look death in the eye. Ivan's tragedy is not that he died. The tragedy is that he had to be dying to discover that he had never really lived. That he spent decades building an identity based on the denial of what he was, a finite, mortal, temporary being. And here is what is most disturbing about Tolstoy's story. Ivan Ilyich could be any one of us. His exemplary life is exactly the kind of life our society promotes and celebrates. And his panic in the face of death is exactly the panic we experience when we are forced to confront our own finitude. The question is not whether we will die. The question is whether we will discover this too late. There is a specific moment in Heidegger's philosophy when he stops talking about death as a concept and begins to whisper about it as revelation. It is when he realizes that we are not beings who are going to die. We are beings who are already dying. With every breath, every heartbeat, every passing second, we are practicing for the end. And it is precisely this awareness, this radical acceptance of our condition, that can free us from the prison we build by running away from it. Being towards death, he calls it, not as a sentence, but as a definition. What makes us human is not our ability to reason, to create, or to love. It is our awareness that all of this is temporary. It is knowing that every word we say, every gesture we make, every moment we live carries within it the weight of farewell. And paradoxically, it is this awareness that makes every moment precious. But Heidegger goes further. He realizes that when we flee from this awareness, when we live as if we were immortal, we are not only deceiving ourselves, we are living inauthentic lives. We are betraying our very nature. It is as if we spend our entire lives pretending to be another species, denying what defines us at the most fundamental level. Imagine for a moment that you could accept not just intellectually but viscerally that your death is an ever-present possibility, not 50 years from now, not when you are old and sick, but right now, today, right now. How would that change the conversation you had yesterday? How would it transform the way you look at the people around you? How would it alter your priorities, your fears, your ambitions? The answer is not what you think. It's not despair. It's not paralysis. It's not nihilism. It's the opposite. It's an almost unbearable clarity about what really matters. It's the gradual dissolution of all the superficial concerns that consume us when we believe we have infinite time. It's the discovery that when we accept our finitude, paradoxically we become freer. Because when you know you're going to die, not as an abstract concept but as a concrete and ever-present reality, you stop living to impress people who are also going to die. You stop torturing yourself over flaws that will be forgotten. You stop putting off important conversations, gestures of affection, moments of true presence. You stop building your identity on things that won't stand the test of time. Tolstoy realized this in the last moments of Ivan Ilyich. After all the agony, all the rebellion, all the resistance, there is a moment of surrender. A moment when Ivan stops fighting his mortality and finally accepts it. And it is only then, on the threshold of death, that he can feel something he had forgotten: compassion. Not just for himself, but for the people around him who, like him, are also dying and also pretending they are not. It is a compassion different from pity. It is the recognition of a shared condition. The realization that we are all in the same situation, thrown into a world without guarantees, aware of our finitude, trying to make sense of an existence that we know to be temporary. And that perhaps, instead of fleeing from this condition, we can find in it a way to connect more deeply with one another. The memento mori of the ancients was not a philosophy of death. It was a philosophy of authentic life. It was a constant reminder that accepting our mortality does not make us weaker, sadder, or more desperate. It makes us more human, more present, more capable of loving unreservedly and living without masks. Look around you now. The walls, the objects, the people who may be close to you. All of this exists in this specific, unrepeatable, temporary moment. You exist in this moment, and awareness of this, rather than terrifying you, can liberate you. Because you don't have to be eternal to be real. You don't have to last forever to matter. You don't have to deny your finitude to find meaning. You are already everything you need to be. Mortal, temporary, fragile, and precisely because of that, infinitely precious. Death is not your enemy. It is your silent companion, the one that gives weight to your choices and meaning to your days. It is the one that transforms every gesture of love into a small eternity and every moment of presence into a form of resistance against emptiness. Remembering that you will die is not surrendering to despair. It is waking up to life. It is discovering that time is not your enemy. It is your closest ally. The thing that makes every breath a miracle and every goodbye a promise that you are here, truly here, even if only for a short time. Death is the only certainty we have. And maybe that's exactly why it should be our first lesson on how to live. Have you ever felt that strange peace that comes when you stop running away from your own finitude? Write in the comments. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos, you reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the codes of the White Rabbit are ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.